in our office, and I know those of you who've worked with him feel the same way. Anyone else, Amber, that I might have missed?
I think you got everybody.
Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and jump in. Amber and I are going to tackle the majority of the orientation, but we do have someone from the Board of Regents office that's going to be joining us in a little bit as well. So, and John, I think you're navigating the slides today. So, if you want to go ahead and get us started, that'd be great. Now, I'm going to begin with the assumption, since all of you have agreed to chair, that you recognize the benefits of shared governance. But that said, I think it is important when we have a moment to reflect on why it is that we do this important work that we do. So I want to talk just for a moment about some of the key benefits of shared governance, and I hope that it also gives you some points that you can speak with others about as well in your leadership work this year. But when we think about all of the benefits that can be derived from shared governance, I want to talk briefly about four in particular that I hope we can continue to center this year. One, that shared governance fosters a culture of trust and collaboration. When we include a wide range of voices in decision making, shared governance can build trust, it can build a sense of shared ownership, and this can lead to more positive and productive campus environment because stakeholders feel like their contributions are valued. Shared governance also ensures institutional stability and continuity. When we involve faculty, staff, and students in shared governance, it helps maintain continuity during leadership changes and hopefully preventing repetition of past mistakes. Shared governance also enhances decision quality. It acts as a system of checks and balances. It brings a variety of perspectives to the table. And so this can lead to more robust and well-vetted decisions that can consider the interest of all stakeholders. And finally, shared governance at its best increases buy-in for difficult changes. When faculty, staff, and students are involved in the planning and implementation of significant changes, they're more likely to support and advocate for them. And this can make the process ideally smoother and more effective, especially during times of strain or institutional restructuring. Now, while shared governance is beneficial, hey, we all know it has some challenges. It can sometimes be slow and complex because it does require extensive consultation and consensus building among different groups with competing interests. And it's also vital, therefore, to have clear definitions of who has authority over what and which areas they have authority over to avoid confusion and gridlock. I think a good example of this is while faculty at the U have primary authority over a curriculum that's designated to them by the Board of Regents, the Board of Regents holds final fiduciary and legal responsibility for the institution. So while it may be slow and it may be complex, again, we do this work hopefully because of those benefits that it contributes and allows us all to feel that we have a stake in the decisions that are made that impact our community and UW and UW system. Oh, my former system, now University of Minneapolis, Minnesota. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amber, who is going to talk a little bit about what the structure of shared governance is at the University of Minnesota.
All right. John, we can move on to the next slide. That's the first time I've heard Laurie slip up in that way, so that's unusual. So yeah, I'm going to talk about the structure of our governance system. So the University Senate is kind of like we refer to it as the umbrella body. It comprises representatives from all four of the other senates. So that's the large circle you see there in the middle. The other senates are all our faculty, student, P&A, and civil service, and those are represented by the other gold circles. So it's important to note, however, that the other senates don't report to the University Senate. It doesn't oversee them in any way. They're all five separate senates that have direct lines to the administration. Um, the University Senate meets about seven times per year, six or seven, and each of the constituent senates also holds separate meetings. Each senate has a consultative committee, which is represented by the white circles on the diagram. The consultative committees are charged with steering and executive duties for the Senates, including setting agendas, serving as a deliberative body for the Senate, and if needed, acting on behalf of the Senate. All of the other committees that are not consultative committees report up through one of the Senates, or sometimes they have a dual reporting line um, through its consultative committee. So I believe the next slide, John, goes into a little bit more detail about consultative committees. Yeah, just so we can all kind of understand what their role is as sort of the deliberative and executive body. Um, so I guess first I'll just talk about the FCC and the SCC. So the Faculty Consultative Committee and the Senate Consultative Committee are the steering committees of the faculty and university senates respectively. So the Senate Consultative Committee comprises members from all four constituencies of the University Senate. It has faculty, students, P&A, and civil service. And all voting members of the FCC are faculty. So that's kind of the distinction between those two bodies. Um, if your committee reports up through the faculty senate, such as SCAFA, Fox, SCEP, then you will be dealing mainly with the faculty consultative committee. And if your committee reports up through the university senate, so equity, access, and diversity, social concerns, things like that, that will go up through the Senate Consultative Committee. There are also a couple of committees that report up through the Student Senate. So obviously the Student Senate Consultative Committee, and then I believe Student Affairs also. So that would be your reporting line. The consultative committees have three major roles: consultative, steering, and executive. The consultative role is more outward facing and basically involves meeting with administrators to discuss and advise on policies and issues of concern and liaising between the Senate and the administration. The steering and executive roles overlap a little bit and are related to the functioning of the Senate and committees. In these roles, the consultative committees are charged with a variety of tasks, including but not limited to overseeing the work of the committees, in a very broad sense. They're not going to, micromanage what you're doing, but just to keeping an eye on what committees are working on and helping bring that up through the Senate when it's appropriate. Receiving recommendations from any constituent who wishes to present a proposal to the Senate, and to refer or act upon such recommendations as it deems appropriate. It also puts together and the Senate agendas and dockets with help from from the Senate Associates, and serves as a deliberative body of the Senate on all major items that it deems necessary and appropriate. It reports regularly on any matters which, in its judgment, should be brought to the attention of the university at large or specifically to the Senate. And it also is charged with disposing of business that is not germane to the purpose of the Senate. Finally, it can act on behalf of the Senate under certain conditions, such as if there's like something happens over the summer and we're not able to pull the whole Senate together. Sometimes the consultative committee will make a decision on behalf of the Senate. Those are always reported out at the next Senate meeting, and the Senate does have the authority to overturn those decisions if they don't care for them, but typically that doesn't happen. So that's the consultative committees. And the next slide talks about the responsibilities of the Senates and that kind of overall the Senate system. So consistent with actions of policies of the Board of Regents, which holds kind of ultimate power over everything at the university, it has delegated certain powers and responsibilities to the Senates. And under that, they have general legislative authority over all matters that affect the university as a whole. It's very broad and vague language. And it is important to remember that that authority exists within the context of Board of Regents reservations and delegations of authority and Board of Regents policies and other university policies. The Faculty Senate also includes primary responsibility for educational and research policies. As mentioned earlier, most of the recommendations that the Senates make are advisory, but exceptions are that the Faculty Senate must approve educational policies and decisions related to the curriculum, as we saw last year, and changes to the tenure policy, among other things. So the Senates are large bodies, ranging from 60 people on the Student Senate to 250 people on the University Senate when all seats are filled. And they meet fairly infrequently, between 2 and 6 or 7 times a year. Therefore, the Senates are often or mostly kind of the last stop for initiatives and actions that come through, meaning they do provide input and approve. They're not just rubber stamping. They do, have a chance to weigh in, but they usually don't get into the nitty-gritty of like really creating actions or digging in deeply to policy changes. So that type of work is generally accomplished in committee, which is where you come in. Um, all right. So this slide shows the different ways that shared governance can provide input and affect change through its committees. The first and primary way is through simply advising and making recommendations to the administration. Um, this often happens pretty informally, really, through consultation or informal dialogue at committee meetings. Often administrators visit committees to talk about a specific issue or to provide an update, on whatever's going on, or even just your ex officio members who are at presumably all or most of your committee members or meetings, just giving updates. And so, in the course of these conversations, often it happens that committee members will suggest ideas, and those are good ideas, and administrators will say, that is a good idea. We're going to do it. And they just do because they agree it's a good idea and it's something that's feasible. So that actually happens quite frequently, more than you would guess. And it happens a lot during those times where it might seem like somebody's coming to just tell information to the committee. Um, there usually is, even if it's just an informational presentation, there is usually some back and forth, and that's when a lot of these conversations happen. Um, and so, we encourage people to, if it seems like you're just getting talked at a lot, remember that it is an opportunity to give feedback and get some of this informal work done, as well as just, if one of your primary duties is to advise, you need to be informed about what's going on at the university in order to do that in a meaningful way. So these presentations really are important, even though it sometimes can feel like the committee's not like doing a lot of big actions. Um, so another way that governance bodies have influence is through policy consultation. Policies undergo comprehensive review on a regular cycle of about 4 years, though I think that is maybe shifting a little with some policies. But many committees have established and documented roles to play in the review cycle. These requirements are codified in the Senate Review Matrix, which is housed on the policy program's website. Um, and for example, most educational policies have to be approved by the Senate Committee on Educational Policy and the Faculty Consultative Committee and the Faculty Senate. Other policies have similar kind of consultation and approval routes. Policies on discrimination, equity, and access, sexual misconduct have to be reviewed by the Equity, Access, and Diversity Committee, etc. These bodies are also consulted whenever policies undergo major revisions outside of the normal review cycle and when there are new policies in development. So turning now to what we call legislative action, there's 3 types of actions a committee can take when it would like to make its opinions heard in a more formal manner outside of, discussions or kind of more the informal route. The 3 types of legislative action we talk about are a letter, a statement, and a resolution. Those actions all end up at the appropriate Senate, either for information or for a vote, depending on what the committee wants to do. Usually resolutions end up for a vote and statements and letters not as often, although they also can go to Senates for a vote. Usually these actions are best if they originate in committee. They, as many of you know, they sometimes do and can come out of the Senate with, a specific senator bringing forth an action, but it is much better when they originate in a committee or at least are kind of sponsored by a committee so they can benefit from the detailed discussion and consultation that committee work affords. Um, and so I guess the next slide has the breakdown of, yeah, so letters and statements I'll talk about first. Oh, sorry, John, you could go back one. Thank you. So the first type of formal committee action is a letter to an administrator or administrators. Just like it sounds, it's kind of hard to describe a letter because that's what it is. But it typically recommends actions or makes suggestions. And it's addressed directly to an administrator, so it's not like a big kind of public thing, although it does go to the Senate for information. The administration is expected to respond to letters. Um, the second option is a statement, perhaps best described as a kind of a sense of the committee statement, in which a committee documents and publishes its opinion on a given matter, but doesn't call for specific action. So there's nothing that the administration needs to do necessarily. It's just this committee feels this way and we want everyone to know it. Um, Again, the administration is supposed to respond to statements too. Often it's just thank you for your statement, or thank you for, providing this statement. We agree or whatever. So it tends to be not a very robust response, but it does usually require a response. Both letters and statements are also posted on the committee's website, as well as being placed on the Senate docket for information, and they're listed in our legislative action tracker, which is linked from our homepage. So they're out there for people to see. And then now I can go to the next slide about resolutions. Um, so a resolution is the most formal and most forceful committee action. Typically, we counsel that those should be reserved for major recommendations that you want to involve a lot of um, consensus building and change management. Most often, they call for major change that either the administration or the broader university community or both aren't entirely sold on. So they include extensive consultation and often compromise with the administration and other relevant groups within the university, including other committees. Consultation often includes elements of socializing an idea and, like I said before, change management, so that by the time the resolution gets to the Senate for a vote, a lot of people have heard about it already and are generally in favor of it. So again, that's where sometimes a compromise comes in. If there's something that the committee brings up that is not a popular part of it, then often it will evolve to as a result of consultation with other groups. If it's approved by the Senate, it goes to the office of the president, who must issue a formal response. Those responses go in the Senate docket. Um, and although it goes to the president's office for a response, and they're the ones who will actually issue the response, often, of course, other administrators are involved in crafting or implementing a response. It is important to keep in mind, however, that resolutions and other actions are advisory for the most part. The administration must respond, but the response doesn't have to be doing what the resolution asks. So it can range from, cool, that's a great idea, we're going to do it, to, yeah, that's a good idea, but we're not totally sure how to do it. Let's think some more about it, to, yeah, thank you for the information, but that's not possible at this time, or it's not possible at all. So this is why consultation, compromise, and collaboration are all really important. If you want a resolution to pass the Senate and then lead actually to change or improvement or whatever it is that the goal of the resolution is, you got to make it so that the administration can actually do it. If they're involved throughout the process and has had time to study the request and think about how it could work, they're much more likely to accept the recommendation, and then you'll have a full, robust, and successful process. Your Senate associate will help guide you through the process of writing, socializing, and bringing a resolution or any other action through the governance system. We have a lot of resources that we've developed over the years to help in this process. And after this presentation, we'll send out some links. I think they also are mentioned later in the presentation as well, but we'll send out links so that you have all of this information available. All right, Laurie, I think you're up.
Okay. So we're going to continue on with the discussion about legislative actions for a moment, and I want to spend some time talking about what can be done to increase the success of legislative actions and what tends to not work. And John, if you could switch to the next, so yeah. Okay, so Amber added a lovely meme that now we've been referring to this section of the orientation as the Jerry Maguire section of chair's orientation, but you will see why. So John, if you could switch to the next slide, please. So as Amber mentioned, the two most common activities that committees engage in are advising and consulting. But every year, some committees do engage in some form of legislative action. And that's why I want to take a moment and talk about how a committee can increase its chances of success when it comes to writing a letter, a statement, or a resolution. Because the bottom line is we all have a vested interest in making sure that shared governance at the U is successful. So I think one place we can begin is by talking about how we might gauge success or failure when it comes to legislative actions. We can take statements as an easy example because, as Amber just shared, the purpose of a statement is to formally register a committee's position on an issue. So following that process to completion does that success. But when it comes to a letter or resolution, the committee is again asking for some action to happen. So the ultimate success in these scenarios is that the administration heeds the recommendation of the committee or a compromise of some kind is brokered. A resolution that passes the Senate but has no chance for implementation is not a success by this measure. And even for those who might think, well, if not, even if nothing, could come of it, the committee or Senate, still got to go on the record with our position. Well, first, I would say a statement is more appropriate action if that is the goal, to register one's position. But a bigger issue to consider is that whether writing a letter, a statement, or a resolution, all paths expend resources. And when I say resources, I'm not just referring to the time and energy of the committee, the Senate office, other governing bodies. Although that's certainly important, when I'm saying resources, I'm also talking about goodwill and political capital. Because when legislative actions fail, there are real consequences. It not only makes shared governance appear ineffective, but it could make the committee appear so as well. It can also damage relationships between the committee, administration, and other governance leaders. To state the obvious, if you want to be an effective chair, you need people who want to work with you. And putting forward legislative actions that ask for things that are not feasible or possible, taking legislative action on every issue, or purposefully engaging in the wrong type of legislative action can be really antithetical to building good working relationships. So, John, if you can take it to the next slide, please. So I want to talk about in the Senate office what we have found to be, John, you're flipping too quick on my animation here. It's okay. So I want to talk about in the Senate office what the things are that we have found to be the reasons why, the most common reasons that legislative actions may not be successful. The first one is there is, and Amber certainly alluded to this, there isn't enough consultation with other committees, senates, or administrators or stakeholders. And when there's not enough consultation, that often leads to a lack of buy-in. It can lead to a misunderstanding of the complexity of an issue. Second, asking for actions that are not practical or possible. Doesn't mean it's not a good recommendation, but it may lay outside the scope of authority. It certainly also may not be, for example, financially feasible. And by the way, herein lies the benefit of having ex officios on your committees. So ex officios are often, often act as subject matter experts, and they have experience working in the offices that closely align with your committees. So they are a great resource in terms of determining, is this practical? Is it feasible, possible? And the third reason legislative action often fails, just to be quite honest, is not following guidance from the Senate office, governance leaders, or your ex officios. So if we know that those are the common reasons why legislative actions often fail, we want to talk about what we can do to increase the chances of success. So, John, you can go to the next slide. I'm going to give you some of the things that we have found to increase the probability of success. I don't have a crystal ball. I cannot say, which actions will unequivocally be successful, but we know some things that will certainly help it along because we have examples of legislative actions that have been successful. So, John, if you can move to the next slide, please. The first thing I want to say is, and this may be, seem obvious, but legislative action is not always the best method to achieve a committee's desired goal. Sometimes just picking up the phone, sending an email, meeting together can initiate change, as Amber mentioned earlier. Keep in mind that talking about an issue first before jumping to a legislative action can go a long way towards relationship building by fostering a climate of collegiality and trust and transparency. If you'll go to the next slide. Regardless, the first thing you need to do when you're considering legislative action is to reach out to the Senate office. Work with your Senate associate to submit the legislative action initiation form. This is what allows the Senate office to advise and guide on process, policy, and procedure from the outset. Actions can be delayed if proper procedure isn't followed. And the further into the process a committee gets without working with the Senate office, the more likely that procedure isn't followed. So help us help you. Our governing documents and our procedural precedent are extensive, and they don't necessarily follow the same process as other boards or governing bodies that you might be familiar with. A good example of this is there are places that deviate significantly from Robert's rules in our governing documents. So we ask that you please let us guide you through that process in order to give you the best chance of achieving your objective. So we've got, first of all, have you talked about it? Have you had a conversation? Can we initiate change or get more information that way? 2, if legislative action sounds like the direction that you need to go, talk to your Senate associate. And then, John, if you could please go to the next slide. Here are 4 additional keys just to keep in mind to help you be an effective leader of effective committees. So the first one is, again, build good working relationships. Build those relationships with your committee members, your ex officios, administrators, the Senate office, stakeholders. And this often begins with making a good faith effort to work together to find solutions to issues. 2, consult, consult, consult. The more, the better. Because consultation is what creates buy-in and it builds consensus, especially for resolutions asking for major change. Consultation is crucial in shared governance because it's what ensures that those who will be affected by a decision have a voice and a role in the process. 3, carefully consider the advice of others for many reasons, but especially because you might not be able to see the whole picture from your perspective when it comes to an issue. Others who occupy different vantage points within the university will have access to information you might not, which can help fill in important gaps. And again, it can also help a committee be strategic in their asks. And speaking of strategic, 4, be strategic and be pragmatic. Keep in mind the big picture, the committee's long-term goals, and the external environment. Be discerning about when committees should request action and how, and when the committee makes recommendations, make sure they're allowable and they're actionable. Remember, resources and political capital are not limitless. One of the many things I learned from serving in office for several years is that governing requires pragmatism if it's to be effective. Compromise is key. And while compromise can sometimes be seen as a sign of weakness in committees, it often leads to stronger, more thoughtful policy, and it can also prevent gridlock and enable action. John, next, please. So, how do we know how do we know that what we're saying has some merit to it? Because we have examples where there has been great success. And I'm going to turn it back to Amber for a moment to talk a little bit about some of those recent examples.
Thanks, Laurie. Yes, so here are some examples, and as Laurie said, these are pretty recent ones. I could have provided several other ones, but I picked one of each type. So, and in fact, I should have included in retrospect an example of kind of an informal conversation leading to change, but I didn't do that. But notes for next time. What I did include are starting out with letter, so the same order I talked about them in before. This was actually an email, but just pretty much a letter, but just even less formal. And it happened when one of the emails we all get every semester from Human Resources, from OHR, about the drug-free campus. And a lot of the members of the committee noticed that, well, there's this information about how we're a drug-free campus, and substance use and whatnot is not allowed. But there weren't any resources in the email for those who struggle with substance misuse. And so the chair of the committee, after some discussion with the committee, just emailed Ken Horstman and said, hey, can we put some language in here directing people where they can get help if they struggle with these issues? And now if you notice, if you go back to any of those emails, or maybe some of you noticed anyway, there is language in there on just what resources are available for people who need help in that area. So maybe a small win, but nevertheless, a win that came just from a pretty informal letter to an administrator from a committee. Turning now to an example of a statement, and this is very recent. Most of you are probably aware that the university did not do super well in the recent state legislative session in terms of funding. However, we did receive funds to build a physical barrier on the Washington Avenue Bridge to deter jumping. And while there were a lot of advocacy efforts around this barrier from outside nonprofits and whatnot, they did bring their cause to first the Student Senate Consultative Committee, who brought it to the Senate Consultative Committee. And when we saw that the university was requesting special funding to get this barrier built, the Senate Consultative Committee, so the SCC, saw an opportunity to support that funding. It didn't require a lot of consultation because it was something that the university was already asking for. So this committee just drafted a statement in support of state funding for this specific project, and it was funded. So this is a good example of kind of picking a specific issue in a broader field to increase efficacy, because if the statement had just urged the legislation to support the university's budget ask in its entirety, probably would have just been disregarded, because that's a big ask. We all know it wasn't going to be funded, and it probably wouldn't have gone anywhere. And so everyone, of course, would have liked to support that whole ask, but I think really supporting just this very specific ask was a strategic move that turned out to be helpful. The third example, which is a little bit older, but resolutions take a long time, so this is kind of a textbook illustration of that, if you will. The third example was a resolution from the Disabilities Issues Committee asking that the administration create and require training on how to support students with disabilities. So this came on the heels of several years ago when the preventing sexual misconduct training was rolled out, and people were really saying, like, well, we're kind of, there's other things that we don't all know how best to deal with. And so the Disabilities Issues Committee said, I think that the time is ripe for a training or professional development on supporting students with disabilities. So this did require some consensus building and some change management. I know that most of us know that certain constituencies, notably faculty, aren't usually big on required training. So it did take some convincing with some groups and even the administration to say, like, no, people are really asking for this, and they were. So some people were resistant at first, of course, but by the time the committee had talked to several different committees and administrators and student groups and other stakeholders, there were people saying, okay, like, we are really ready for this training. And by the time that it went to the Senate, it passed the Senate, and people were really asking for that training at that time. Um, it was a very long process, and then there was, in fact, a task force to implement the recommendation afterwards. So that wasn't the end of the process, but it did get done. The vast majority of people were behind it, and it was a good product. And so that I think was a really effective, an example of really effective shared governance work. And I will just add that the fact that there was an implementation task force also highlights another important part of resolutions, which is that it's not the responsibility of shared governance to figure out how to do it. It's the responsibility of shared governance to have the idea and consult to make sure that the people who would be tasked to figure out how to do it think that it can be done. But it's not the job of a committee to say, like, work out where the funding would come from or all, like, logistical details, because that's best left up to people who are experts in those areas. But it is important to hear from them so that it's not just kind of a dead end road. All right. On that note, I will hand it back to Laurie.
Thanks, Amber. Thanks for sharing those examples with us. We're gonna transition to our last piece before we welcome our next speaker. And I'm going to talk some about our office and a little bit about the nuts and bolts that, especially for folks who may be stepping into the chair position for the first time this year, may find particularly helpful. John, if you could go to the next slide, please. So as you can see here, the mission of the University Senate Office is to facilitate the successful operation of the governance system at the University of Minnesota by providing professional support and guidance to University Senate governance bodies and their constituent committees. Senate associates organize and facilitate well over 250 Senate and committee meetings every year. And by the way, that does not include planning and strategy meetings, student behavior and judicial committee hearings, civil service employment rules hearings, professional development. You get the point. Each Senate associate has a portfolio of governing bodies that they work with that aligns with their areas of expertise. And while it's true that you will interact most of the time with your particular Senate associate, there are times when it may be necessary for you to liaise with someone else in the Senate office. So it's a good idea to get to know our team a little bit. So quickly, I am going to reintroduce them briefly so you can get a sense of the various senates and committees that they have within their portfolio. And you'll notice often a theme, if you will, to the portfolio, and that reflects their expertise. So Amber, we'll just start with you if you'd like to. Yes, thank you. So again, as Amber said, she's our senior Senate associate and operations coordinator. Amber's also a double alumna from University of Minnesota with her BA in Master of Liberal Arts in Language and Identity. Amber is a great resource for many reasons, including that she has been at the university for 18 years and she has been in the Senate office for 8 years. So I rely frequently on her historical knowledge and her insight into how to sort of navigate different governing groups. Next, we've got Jacqueline Adair. Like Amber, she's also been at the university for a long time and is also an alumna of the University of Minnesota. Jacqueline's also our policy coordinator. So as was mentioned earlier, one of the important tasks that committees do is consult on policies, and Jacqueline plays an important role in that process. She has also spent 11 years working in faculty and academic affairs, and that comes in very handy for the governing bodies that she works with. Then we've got Dina Barker. So a lot of the committees and that Dina works with all are related to equity work in one way or another. And Dina comes to those committees with certificates in leading diversity, equity, inclusion from Northwestern University and Cornell University. Dina also spent 20 years in the private sector before coming to the U. And so having that perspective, I think also not only serves our office well, but the committees well that she works with. We have Donovan Lura next. He also started at the U in a different area before coming over to the Senate office. He started at the U in 2022, joined us, spent almost a year now. Donovan came to this role having spent a number of years working as an undergraduate and graduate student in governance. So he worked on policy development as a graduate assistant in the president's office. He served 3 years in student governance and Students United. He also has a master's in higher education administration. So Donovan will be doing a lot of work with students and around athletics committees. And he is taking over the portfolio, as John mentioned earlier. John was particularly skillful at supporting those committees as well, given his background, master's in legal studies, and then years spent with the Student Senate and a student council president when he was a student as well. And then we've got Jessica Paulson, who you will probably get to know at some point over the year, because what doesn't she handle, it feels like. We're so grateful to Jessica and the work that she does, not only to support our office. And what some of you may not know is our office is not just comprised of the Senate office, but also University Awards and Honors. And Jessica does a lot of work with that piece of it as well. She has been at the U for nearly 25 years, and 22 of those years has been in her office. So she is a vital resource to me. And do not be surprised if you ask me something and I say, let me copy Jessica on my team for something to ask her. So that's the team. And even though, again, you will have an associate you work most closely with, inevitably you will probably see us, and in particular me, from time to time as the director, which now reminds me, I think I have a slide on here as well. As I let slip earlier, I came to the University of Minnesota from the University of Wisconsin system, where I served as a full tenured faculty member for many years, but also spent time in again, elected office and leading a nonprofit as an executive director. So I rely on all of those experiences to hopefully support the work you're doing, and hopefully be able to help provide some guidance. Okay, so speaking of that guidance, I want to conclude with this last piece about, well, who does what? And again, this might be what is particularly of interest to some of our newer chairs. If you will flip to the next slide, John. So this handy chart will not include every aspect, but the most important sort of nuts and bolts pieces of what you need to know about the responsibilities in the chair role and who does what. So when it comes to setting an annual work plan, and another way to think about that is sort of like, broadly agenda setting for the year. What are things that are on the horizon? What are policies that need to be reviewed this year? What are big issues that may be becoming before your committee? That's a conversation between you, your Senate associate, your ex officios, working hand in hand to develop a plan for that. As far as doing the actual scheduling of meetings and calendar invites, the Senate associate is going to take care of that piece. As Amber said, it's very common to have speakers come to meetings, because if you got to advise and consult, you need to make sure you're staying abreast of what's happening. And so identifying who would be important speakers, chairs play an important role in that. Ex officios play an important role in that. Confirming the agenda and then making sure those guests know where to be and when. Your Senate associate will support that part of it. As chair, it is your job to approve the agenda. So your Senate associate will likely, put together some kind of draft framework based on those conversations with you and your ex officios, but you need to approve it. So as a responsibility of the chair, we ask, the sooner the better. To be honest with you, I mean, in an ideal world, we'd be getting that agenda out, a week in advance, because especially when it comes to policy reviews or the discussion of important issues, we've got to give committee members time. Got to give them time to be able to read through the materials, formulate questions. But I know that it oftentimes doesn't work that way, because there are changes that even have to be made at the last minute. But what I do ask is that 72 hours before a committee meeting, we have gotten approval of an agenda, because we need that in order to carry out our end. And so approving that agenda is the responsibility of the chair. Sending out meeting reminders, sending those agendas out, your associate's going to take care of that. Chair is going to lead the meeting. If you have questions, certainly, a Senate associate can respond or can seek additional guidance that they need to. They're going to navigate that technology, and then are also going to comprise the minutes following that meeting. And I oftentimes think about, when we talk about minutes in the Senate office, it oftentimes feels like a misnomer, because really the kind of minutes that we are oftentimes putting together are really historical documents. And you've served on your committee, so you know what I'm talking about. So associates are going to put those together, send those out to senates and committees for review. Now, as far as providing context for what the committee is doing or wants to do, logistics, implementation, all of those procedures. Ex officios are going to be valuable resources for that. So please make use of that resource. And again, your Senate associate there is to provide advice, to provide guidance. And let me tell you, when something comes up in a committee that, especially something that's a little more complex, your Senate associate is going to bring that to my team, and our team is going to talk about it together, and oftentimes offer some guidance based on past precedent, based on the governing documents, the rules, the bylaws, the Constitution. So know that your Senate associate is your liaison to the Senate office, but oftentimes we are also behind the scenes and offering some support. So with that, we are right on time with what we want to do. And here, the final piece is to answer questions. But Amber, I think I'm going to do this real quick. I think let's go ahead and let's bring in our next speaker from the board office, and then that afterwards we can use that for just questions that may come up to us or to her. So let's see. I'm looking through.
Marlo is here.
Marlo. Okay. All right. I'm looking through my list of folks to see, where is Marlo? All right, Marlo, I'm going to turn it over to you, and then we'll just come back for some questions later.
Great. Well, thanks for inviting us. My name is Marla Welshans. I'm the Assistant Executive Director here in the Office of the Board of Regents. I've been with this office for just over 2 years, and prior to that, I was with the provost office for 11 years. And I did a number of things, some of which was policy work. So I worked very closely with the Senate office and the various Senate committees. So thank you for your service. I know that the Senate work, and especially the chair position, is a lot, and it is important to the university and all that we do. So I will just very briefly tell you a little bit about what is the board, who are the board members. Obviously, I know a lot about this. Not everybody pays this much attention. And so some people don't even know that our regents, the Board of Regents, is 12 individuals, volunteers. They do a lot of work, and it's all for no pay. They are 12 who are elected usually by the legislature. And they serve 6-year terms, and they are staggered. So every 2 years, there is an opportunity to elect new regents or to re-elect incumbent regents. 8 of those regents serve as representatives of the 8 congressional districts in Minnesota, and 4 are at large, one of which is required to be a student when they are elected. The student regent is a voting member of the board. We also have student representatives. They are not voting members, but they are selected from all the campus student governance organizations, and they are assigned to all of our standing committees and sit with the regents at the table and participate in all the discussions, and they bring a really important perspective to those conversations. So that's the board itself and the members, but what really is their role? Sometimes we talk about it as people who understand their local school district and their school board. It's sort of like they're the school board for the university. And in that role, they are the governing body. So they certainly do some key tasks like hiring the president, approving the budget. But really the most important thing that this board does, and again, they do it as a board collectively, no one regent is able to, do anything or say anything that makes up what the regents as a board can do. So collectively, the 12 of them set all of the important policies that govern the university. That includes the mission and other guiding principle type policies that then the administration and then all of you work to administrate those policies or administrate that work of the university, the teaching, the outreach, the research, the student support, alumni work, all of that everyone does. So then how do they do that? When we're onboarding new regents, which we're in the middle of doing right now, we had 4 new regents just join the board about 2 or 3 weeks ago. I've lost track of time. We talk with them about thinking about governance as always trying to answer 4 questions. So the first question is, where are we going? Where is the university trying to go? Who is responsible for getting us there? Usually it's not the regents themselves, it's the president or somebody within the university who has that responsibility delegated. And how do we measure success? So when they're talking with the various people who come to the board meetings and present, they want to understand what they're setting as the vision and the direction. Are we getting there or not? And if not, what do we need to do to get there? And then finally, what are the risks? So with those 4 questions always being at the sort of back of their mind, then that is how they individually then come together to try and make decisions that set the direction for the university. So that's just the high level explanation of who the board is, what they do, and how they do it. But we're happy to, answer any questions you might have now, or feel free to follow up through uregents@umn.edu, and we can answer any other questions.
Thank you, Marlo.
Yeah.
Let's open it up for questions. We've got 2 final pieces to share, but let's give you a chance to speak or ask for clarity on anything.
The one thing I will quickly add, and
Yeah, of course.
seeing Kit on here, he could speak to this. One of the things that we also do is have the FCC chair, the chair of the PNA Senate committee, and the civil service committees come and actually give formal reports to the board, which they very much value because You know, they spend a lot of time looking at agenda items that are deep in the weeds about money and other kinds of, you know, things, but any chance they get to actually hear from faculty, from staff, and from students to understand, you know, what they're doing and their concerns is of great value. So.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Marlo. All right. Any questions at this time? Now, keep in mind that this is obviously not the only time to ask questions, and I fully believe that once you get into the semester, you may have questions emerge that you might not even anticipate at the time. But there are two final things I want to make sure that I touch on that, and the first one is new for this year. And it has to do with grad assistants on committees. So there's going to be some guidance that will be sent out to all chairs within the next couple of days from my office that actually comes from OHR, OGC with regards to grad assistants on committees, because if you have been following along, grad assistants are now a labor represented group, and that raises questions about what role GAs may play in shared governance. And because historically at University of Minnesota, labor represented groups are not part of shared governance. Now, grad assistants, however, occupy a dual role of students, and they are first and foremost students, and secondarily employees. And so what does this mean moving forward? So for now, the decision has been that grad students who serve on committees or have a role on the Senate, who are also grad assistants, can continue to serve, but there are some parameters around that. And the parameters involve discussions about what kinds of discussions can take place in committees with graduate assistants present, and what cannot. So for example, the university, because they cannot direct deal with graduate assistants, means that conditions of employment, as one example, cannot be discussed in meetings where grad assistants are present. So the guidance has been put together for chairs to keep in mind. Now, let me just say, some of you will be chairing committees that do not have any designated grad student roles on them, so there would not necessarily be a chance that one of those grad students would be a grad assistant. But some of you may chair committees where that is the case. So that guidance will be sent out to you by the end of this week. And again, it pretty much kind of covers the scope of what can be discussed and what cannot. The final thing I want to end on, and for returning chairs, this will be you will be familiar with this practice, but it has been a practice for some time that governance leaders, that includes committee chairs, are invited to attend a Gophers game together with your colleagues in shared governance who lead committees and senates. There are 2 tickets that are awarded, and then additional tickets can be purchased. John, I believe that's for $65 each. But the seats also have access to, I cannot think of the name of it. John, you want to jump in and remind us?
The Cambria Club. Yeah.
The Cambria Club. So the game where those the tickets are available for September 27th. The time for the game has not been established yet. I checked this morning as well, but you will also receive an email from the Senate office asking if you will be joining us. So, so with that, again, one last opportunity for any questions, comments. Happy to entertain them. And John, if we can take down the slides, that would be great.
So Lori, this is Cliff. Can I make a comment?
Of course you can.
So I have been involved with the Senate office since the mid-90s when I returned to the University of Minnesota. I think I was chair of the Judicial Commission Committee at that time, and I can only underscore what a remarkable team that you do have and how helpful you have been to me with SCAFA and all the other committees that I've been involved with. And the other thing I wanted to comment on is how many people here, and raise your hand, actually know who Jerry Maguire is? Thank you.
Yeah, that reference might be a little outdated, but
Absolutely, and that's the reason for doing it.
everyone else just has to go watch the movie now.
You know, Cliff, I'll never forget one of my last semesters teaching at a student who said, my favorite movie is 16 Candles. It's real old. I think they made it back in the I think they made it back in the 50s. Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, listen, thank you so much for being here and for being part of the orientation. We are always looking for opportunities to improve on the orientation each year. If there's additional information that, you know, would be helpful, don't hesitate to drop me a note and let me know. Many thanks to my team and Amber for their work. And I will also say that this is recorded. So if you needed to go back, it would be available to you. But again, don't hesitate to reach out. You will likely see me at least at your first meetings if I do not regularly work with your committee. So I want to make sure that you know you're not out there by yourself. So thank you so much. Enjoy a long weekend and the beautiful days right now.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.